So I think that's the big news coming out of the conference over the weekend, especially off the field concepts, is after the BYU, or I guess even to rewind it, there's a ticky-tacky holding call called on Utah down the stretch, gave BYU a first down. They were ultimately able to get the win. And then for the first time in my college football viewing life, I saw the athletic director take the podium after a football game, hijack the press conference to talk about how the game was stolen from them. And typically you see a lot of that energy get towards to the specific officials, but Utah athletic director Mark Harlan uh, directed that blame to the Big 12 conference as if it was Brett Yormark's or the conference's fault that they lost the game. I don't even know where to start with this. There's so much craziness. I've never seen an athletic director take the podium like that after a football game. I've never seen anybody, like a coach, a player, an administrator, nonetheless, point blame at a conference for this. Of course, there's irony in the fact that they're talking about how they were happy to be in the Big 12 and now, all of a sudden aren't happy being in the Big 12 when they're the ones who abandoned the Pac-12.
Right.
So much to unpack here. What a crazy little sequence.
It's kind of an insane sequence, if you ask me, Brandon, because this doesn't happen. And this is a first-year school in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Like, what a shot to take at a conference that, offered you a bid, wanted you to come over, open their arms when your conference was kind of disintegrating. And this is, I'm going to put bluntly, Brandon, is pretty insane. And, I saw the play, Brandon. I mean, I thought there was a flag. I mean, you could go 50-50.
Yeah, there was something.
But at the end of the day,
what I don't want to hear is could have gotten the South. They could have scored 2 points in the second half. That's all it would have taken.
They just need. It was all excuses, is what it comes down to, Brandon. And those excuses just aren't good enough. Like, they gave up those big yardage plays ultimately that set up the field goal. They mismanaged the clock earlier, like a few minutes before, where they were able to give BYU a little bit extra time. And BYU, they didn't play their finest game. And rivalry games do kind of usually are pretty junky and unique in terms of execution for both teams, but they got it done. And if that guy misses a field goal, obviously it's just, hip, hip, hooray. There would have been no, obviously, statement for the AD. But for that AD to come out and say that is interesting. And it will be interesting to see how Brett Yormark, reacts to that as well.
So it looks like that Harlan was fined $40,000 and given a public reprimand for his comments by the conference, which, by the way, is hefty. That's a hefty fine because it's not like an NBA player on a $100 million contract getting fined $100,000. This is, I'm sure, I don't know what his financial situation, but I looked it up. He's only making $700,000. That's a chunk. And I guess kind of rightly so. What an insane way to, what an insane way to act as an administrator, as the face of a Division I athletic program. Unbelievable.
Pretty unbelievable, Brandon Shanahan. It is, I've got to put bluntly, amazing what they've been able to put together, and amazing just what the conference has put together, where Brent Yormark comes in, 3 years ago, Brandon? Conference was, he acquired it with OU and Texas still intact, and within months of, I think it was he had said 2 weeks before, hey, we've never been stronger, we're doing great, and then Texas and Oklahoma say we're jumping ship, and Big 12 could have easily dissolved. That was
such a breaking point. Yeah.
It was a scary time. It really was. He wasn't phased. He just went out and started attacking, started finding schools that could help keep this conference running. So Brett Yormark's not going to be fired. I don't think he's
No,
scared of anything. So I think
no,
when he's doling out
no.
fines like that, he's not even phased by really any of these ADs. He knows how to get his ducks in a row pretty quickly.
Yeah, without a doubt. Whatever Brett Yormark, he's he's got probably the coldest seat in college football or in college
Yeah.
athletics in general. He's been such a superstar, such a breaking point, and the aggressiveness that he took this opportunity with is paying off because that's the whole reason Utah's in this league anyways, and the Pac-12 barely exists, is because of Brett Yormark saving the Big 12 as opposed to letting it collapse upon itself. About the penalty specifically, ticky tacky, I suppose. But my
Yeah.
my thing is, and this is the most consistent take I have when it comes to penalties. If you have an opportunity to win the game, if you have a reasonable opportunity to win the game after the penalty, and you can't figure it out, that's
Yeah.
not a bummer. It's a first of all ticky tacky call, whatever, 50-50. Some folks are saying you can't call that in that spot. If it's a penalty, it's a penalty. I mean, all I've really seen is like grainy cell phone footage from 80 yards away. So ticky tacky, I'm sure they had a better view on it than I did. But then even after that, and yes, I know that was a huge turning point in the game. They got sacked, and it would have been much harder, almost impossible for BYU to win that game afterwards. You still had the opportunity to stop BYU. Leading up to that point, you
Yeah.
still had an opportunity to score a point in the second half, and you didn't. That's why you lost, not because the
Yeah.
Big 12 stole it. Like I always go back to that NFC Championship game with the Saints and the Rams, where there was a controversial non-pass interference call.
Famous.
Yes, that was
Yep.
a missed call. Yes, that would have put the game to bed for the Saints. But the Saints got the ball to start overtime. Then Drew Brees threw an interception. Like that's why they
Yeah.
lost the game. You know, our certain friends out east like to talk about a specific catcher's or a fair catch invalid signal from last year. That team still had the ball 1st and 10 at like the 35-yard line. They get 2 first downs to kick a field goal, win that game, but they couldn't
Yeah.
because they had Deacon Hill as their quarterback. That's why they lost that game.
And I think it is natural fan reaction. I've definitely been there. And I guess as somebody, look, mentioned the Saints Rams, look, 15 years ago, Saints Vikings, NFC Championship. Am I afraid to throw out Bounty Gate? Yeah, I throw it out all the time. Same time, Brett Favre threw a terrible interception with 8 seconds to go in regulation that, if he just holds the ball, they could potentially kick a field goal to go to the Super Bowl. I can look at it like that as well. So it really is just depends on how you view life, Brandon, because officials do have a job. They do need to do a good job of trying to call a mostly accurate game, but they are human as well. But I always think people seem to remember, I mean, naturally so. You seem to remember those final plays the most. That's what a natural viewing audience is going to remember. There are things that happen the first, second, third quarters that are all still as important, whether it's maybe not converting on a 3rd and 1, or maybe there is a missed field goal early. I mean, like every minute matters in the world of football. All 60 minutes matter. So, I mean, it just depends. I mean, on how you view life. And for Utah, it is a tough loss. And for a season that's been where they should be much better, they're not. They thought they'd run the conference. They haven't. This has been frustrating. But at the end of the day, what do you say? I mean, you just have to look at things in the mirror as well.
Yeah, and I think an important thing that you mentioned is the difference between what fans think and what fans are reacting and how they are taking to the situation compared to like officials and or school officials, student administrators, athletic directors. Like that's a different standard. Coaches get fined if they point fingers and throw temper tantrums about refs. Mark Harlan got a huge hefty fine for it. Like that's such a different thing, and I think it's fitting with Utah in particular because I saw a lot of fan engagement coming into the season that was kind of looking down on the Big 12. Like it was like they were too good for the Big 12. Like, oh, we'll just bide our time until the Big 10 calls. Uh, so I saw that from fans, and I mean, going back and forth about whether it's justified or not. 4-5 record says otherwise, but it is what it is. But now to hear that same sentiment from a leader in that position, from somebody who had to have championed to join the Big 12, that's such a big decision that it's the biggest decision an athletic director could ever make, is conference realignment and how to go about it. To hear that same kind of sentiment from them, because it's not like that they were super thrilled to be in the Big 12 conference at 7 o'clock, and then all of a sudden a call doesn't go their way, and now they're questioning their status in the Big 12. This is obviously something that's been on his mind for a long time, as far as how he feels about the conference, and it's just very telling to hear that from a key decision maker like that.
Very telling, Brandon, but that's why you have key decision makers, that you hope they lead right. And for your mark, he leads right. And for Utah, not saying that they don't have leadership that doesn't work, but you don't want to start a precedent if you're an athletic department like that, where you're just blaming fingers at the conference of why you lost instead of just looking in the mirror. You just don't want to start that. It's just not healthy for, I think, any athletic department.
Yeah, last thing I'll say about that game, Utah scored a field goal with 1:46 to go in the second quarter, and then 0 points after that to point the finger at anybody else other than the football team for losing that game at home, by the way, is unbelievable.
They had it won. I mean, no one's going to deny that, Brandon. And I thought Utah's defense actually did play pretty well overall.
Yeah.
It's that offense that just continues to be a bugaboo for them. And that's a great rivalry, though. Goodness, if you want juice for next year, my goodness gracious, did they get it and then some? So, look, this is kind of a ridiculous scenario right now of just kind of how everything is playing out. But I will say, Brandon, that long term, this is good for the conference, I think, in general. Just we need these type of rivalries. We need these type of beefs. And this is one that was already kind of built in, but boy, it does feel like we've got some extra juice now between these two schools. I didn't think we could go much higher, but we sure found it this weekend, Brandon. And for that, we're kind of appreciative in a weird way. At least I am.
I don't know if I want to give Utah this much credit. Are they the new villain in the conference? Because I know Texas was the villain for a while, and not just because of football performance. They won one Big 12 championship in the last decade and a half during their stint here. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like that was the school that everybody just kind of banded together. Like, we hate Texas. This is a big deal for us. We're giving them their best effort, even if it's like a 2-10 Kansas team. Like, is Utah the villain?
Boy, you and I have been billing him as the villain for months, Brandon. So why not? I mean, we've been ripping them since August. So why not at this juncture? They've lived exactly into our expectations. You and I have, you've definitely had your cracks. I feel like every single show, like Brandon Shanahan in Utah, that is not a match made in heaven. And I mean, why wouldn't we? Why on earth would we not continue to say they're the villain? It's good for the football program. Basketball, look, we got a ton of villains in basketball, so that's good. Like, that will never be a problem. We got some great villains.
You got a Jim Carrey lookalike villain.
Oh, you're dang right on that one, Brandon. Holy shit. No question about that. But yeah, I mean, Utah definitely, I think football-wise, is a villain right now. I think Colorado is still kind of a villain a little bit, even though
that's a good point.
They're a unique villain. They're kind
of they're flash in the pan villain. They won't be around for long as a villain.
Yeah, but I mean, it is good for the conference just to have those natural villains. Like, we do kind of need that. Big Ten's got plenty. SEC's got plenty. That's something the Big 12 is continuing to work on.
I think so. I just wonder how, like, other fan bases, specific niche fan bases feel about Utah. Like, I wonder if it's the same kind of anima, and how much of it is just from me being chronically online. Like if you go to a Kansas tailgate, do you think they really give a shit about Utah?
That's a great point. And that's, we've talked about it with natural regional rivalries. Like, they don't care about Utah as much as they care about their old conference rival
Yeah,
Mizzou. There's still, those two schools still despise each other. And
yeah, that's
like, they
right.
haven't played regularly in over 15 years, or I mean, almost 15 years now. But I mean, eventually, I mean, if these teams play long enough and hopefully face off against another enough, hopefully these natural rivalries can continue to be kind of built in, and hopefully some animosity continues to develop between these programs and fan bases. I think it is just good for fandom in general. Hate is good for fandom in general.
Final thing I'll say about the Holy War, I love the uniform matchup. I love the all reds and the all blues. That's such a sick look, and I hope they do that every single year.
Same, same. Really
That was
clean.
so
I'm gonna
awesome.
say that was a clean uniform matchup for sure.